If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so honored today to have our great leader and inspirational CEO, Tom Rooney from SPG Solar. Welcome, Tom, to Green is Good.
Hi, thanks to be here.
Hey, Tom, you are a serial entrepreneur who has had many, many successes before, and then sort of came back off the bench to take the reins of SPG Solar and take it to a whole new level. Explain how that all happened.
Sure. So SPG Solar was founded in 2001 by a phenomenal entrepreneur by the name of Dan Thompson, and then, like much of the solar industry, grew extensively. And about a year ago, I was brought on board to take the company to the next level of size and sophistication, and it's just been a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
You had green in your background. Tell our listeners a little bit about your great history and what you have been doing already in the green segment and environmental work.
Sure. Well, most prominently, I ran a water infrastructure company that helped a lot of countries with water infrastructure issues literally all over the world. And as I would travel the world and meet with governments in China and India and Australia and places around the United States, it became obvious to me that water had become one of the most critical environmental issues and clean tech issues in the world. And so what really began to get into focus for me was the fact that while I and a number of other people were focusing intensely on water, there was a whole separate group of people focusing intensely on energy issues, clean energy and environmental challenges and so on and so forth. And ironically, sometimes the solutions that the water people would put out would create problems on the energy side, and oftentimes the solutions on the energy side would create problems on the water side. And so, unlike very many people, I actually made the crossover about a year ago from water infrastructure issues to energy issues, and it's been a lot of fun. And in between, I also sit on the board of a number of corporations in the area of biosolids and water and so on. So the whole world of clean energy and clean technology is just booming right now. It's just a fun place to be.
And obviously, it's in your DNA, but it is. But the fascinating thing is, you just talked about water and your great history in that industry, and what we're understanding is that there's a water energy nexus that is not overt to the rest of the world, that you understand tremendously that nexus, and Mike and I want you to share with our listeners because it's a very important nexus.
Sure. Well, it's what I was just mentioning, and the description for it is, in fact, or the title for it is the Water Energy Nexus, and I've literally spoken on that subject in Beijing and Boston and Shanghai and Sydney. So,
but I know you have tremendous stories, and you're amazingly traveled. Share with our listeners some of the more eye-opening stories that are easy for us all to understand. Like about that time you were in Sacramento with the governor's folks, Governor Schwarzenegger's folks, and you were explaining to them about this, what you call the Water Energy Nexus.
Right. So for everybody's benefit, what we mean by the Water Energy Nexus is back to what I was saying, which is that the world right now, many places in the world right now are facing epic droughts and a severe lack of water. California is, in fact, one of those places. One only has to drive up and down Interstate 5 to see agricultural businesses that are being shut down for lack of water. Exactly the same thing is going on in China and in Australia and the Middle East and even through Georgia and places like that. So we have epic shortages of water predicated on our water use and whatnot. So you have a lot of really smart people out there trying to fix water shortages. Governor Schwarzenegger is one of them.
Right.
Equally smart are thousands of people who are trying to resolve our critical energy crises going forward. Lack of energy, lack of clean energy, global warming, so on and so forth. And as I'd mentioned a minute or two ago, many times, in fact, most times, the solution to the water problem creates more of a problem on the energy side, and a solution on the energy side creates a water problem. So I'll give you a quick example.
Sure.
When I was in Sydney, Australia, I opened the newspaper one morning while I was there helping them with water infrastructure issues, and the literal headline of the newspaper in Sydney was, "Unlimited clean water is on the way." And you read down into it, and basically they were going to, and are planning to use reverse osmosis and desalinate seawater.
Right.
Well, it works. It's a great solution, except for one thing. It takes a gargantuan amount of energy to turn seawater into fresh water, but it can be done.
Okay.
And so one man's solution for a water problem creates another person's epic problem on the energy side. Conversely, it's people looked at ethanol at one time as a great solution for energy problems, and of course we've learned that there are some significant problems there. But one of the most severe was the idea that to create ethanol you have to grow corn, and to grow corn you have to irrigate and use water, and so therein lies another issue of an energy solution that has huge water needs. And so to the point of the example in Sacramento. So just to use Governor Schwarzenegger as an example of a very, very smart politician working feverishly,
right,
both in the area of clean energy for the state,
right,
and the state is a leader in that regard, and at the same time, near desperate needs around water. And so I happen to be, the company that I'm running, SPG Solar, we had just finished a large solar installation very near to Sacramento. And we were doing the ribbon-cutting ceremony, and of course everybody was standing around because it's a solar photovoltaic system, and talking about, and backslapping, if you will, about all the great carbon savings. So many thousands of tons of carbon would be saved in the 25-year life expectancy. And so I was standing talking to one of the people from the governor's staff and a reporter, and I said, so looking out there on the field, right out there where the solar system is, none of us can see the carbon being saved. And somebody said, that's true, and that's because 10 miles away, shall we say, there's a coal-fired facility that doesn't have to run for an hour or however, and therefore 10 miles away the carbon is being saved. And I said, yeah, that's right. And I said, so what we look out here on this field right now, what other issue is of monumental concern to Governor Schwarzenegger that is also being fixed out there? And everybody looked at me puzzled, had no idea what I was talking about. And I said, well, what if I told you that solar system sitting out there is going to save the state 25 million gallons of water, or actually 2 million gallons of water per year for 25 years, 50 million gallons of water. And they both chuckled and said, wouldn't that be great? I said, it's true. And they looked at me puzzled and said, I don't get it. I don't see it. And I said, well, you don't see it any more than you don't see the carbon that's being saved, because the reality is when that so-called coal-fired facility doesn't have to run to produce the electricity that this is running, it also doesn't have to use water for evaporation and cooling. And cooling is a dramatic water use for all power generation.
Wow.
And I went into it and I said, so simultaneously, this photovoltaic system is saving the state of California thousands of tons of carbon emissions, but it's also saving millions of gallons of water. And the staffer, one of the key staff members from Governor Schwarzenegger's office, looked at me and said, how come the governor doesn't know this? And I looked right back at him and I said, you tell me. And you know what? Governor Schwarzenegger is an incredibly smart guy.
We agree.
And doing wonderful things. But what this points up is that from Sydney, where they call desalination free water, to the state of California, where we don't recognize that solar photovoltaic systems are actually water-saving systems, there isn't enough information out there. And that's why governments and major organizations ask me to speak on the subject of the Water Energy Nexus. Now, by the way, it's not a crazy thought because the Department of Energy has figured it out. And so the Department of Energy is railing on this issue, but nobody seems to be listening, and that is to this notion of the Water Energy Nexus. And one of the reasons that I was so excited about coming to run a leading solar company is that in the whole world there are probably only 2 or 3 technologies that fix both sides of the equation at the same time, or at least don't do harm to one while it's fixing the other. And so one of them would be wind, and the other one would be solar photovoltaics. And so for me, seeing the Water Energy Nexus years before anybody else did, and then seeing which technologies work, it was a natural for me to come here.
It makes so much sense, too, because one of the things that resonated with me, Tom, what you just said just a few moments ago, is any kind of an energy creation, and you were focusing especially on coal-fired plants, but any kind of energy creation requires a tremendous amount of water. And I'm thinking, well, nuclear. You've got to have an awful lot of water to keep the uranium rods cool. Yeah, and the cooling towers. And so I'm hard-pressed to think of too many energy sources other than solar or wind that don't require a good deal of water.
Right. And you even have to, you're absolutely right, and for your listeners' benefit, I would suggest that the next time you look at the picture of a nuclear power facility, what you're actually looking at is a cooling tower. That conical, vertical icon that we think of as a nuclear power facility, what we're actually looking at is the cooling tower. And at the top of that cooling tower, there will always be a huge puff of steam coming out.
Right.
And to put a real head on it for you, in the United States, 48% of all the water that is taken from rivers and streams every single day, 48% is taken for cooling towers for electricity production. And so shutting down nuclear power facilities, shutting down coal, let me take a step back, shutting down thermoelectric power production, which is to say anything that takes creating heat to create electricity, that's where the word thermoelectric comes from.
Right.
Is shutting down a huge water consumption point. And the fact, too, is that in the case of coal, there's also now a tremendous amount of water being used for mining of it. And I'm not here to dump on coal or nuclear or anything else. What the point is, though, what I think the world is starting to figure out right now is there are two footprints. There is a carbon footprint, like many people think about. There's also a water footprint. And so the very smartest politicians and smartest policymakers are now starting to say, don't talk to me about the carbon footprint unless you simultaneously tell me what the water footprint is.
And that's amazing. That's another great term that I didn't read until I read in your writings, because I get some of your wonderful writings. And in that writing about the water footprint, I just want to hit on this one more topic example before we move on to so many other things that we want to talk about what you're accomplishing at SPG Solar is, this came from some more of your writings. Researchers at Virginia Tech say it takes 8 to 16 gallons of water to burn one 60-watt light bulb for 12 hours a day. That's 3,000 to 6,300 gallons of water a year.
Right.
That's amazing. So your terminology of water footprint and the water energy nexus is so important to understand. And again, I just want our listeners to be able to access all of the great things you're doing, Tom, at spgsolar.com, spgsolar.com. But there's so much else to talk about. Talk about, now you came in, took over this legacy company, which had already had a great base. But how did you turn it into a profit center? How are you scaling it now and focusing it so it is a sustainable business model and it can take on a whole new scaling?
Right. Well, much like any high technology-driven industry, you start off with entrepreneurs doing wildly creative and imaginative things that are, even outside of my skill set. But eventually, industries evolve into more professional and long-range, operationally driven businesses. And so that's what I do. And I came in, and you might laugh at some of the things that we have changed and done as a company in the last year, but they're simple. They're the blocking and tackling issues that great companies do. The management of cash, management of scheduling. We've implemented Lean Six Sigma, which is actually much more advanced, but it's quality and cycle time. And so simple things like a $6 million project that used to take 6 to 8 months for us to do 2 years ago now takes 6 to 8 weeks to do.
But how about just like the simple stuff also? Didn't you turn the company from residential solar to now focusing on business?
Right.
Okay.
And in that regard, the solar industry in and of itself has graduated from being exclusively little systems on top of people's homes to much, much more than that. And so when we started the company, or when the company was started in 2001, it was 100%, like everybody else's, predicated on doing residential rooftop solar systems. Today, we're doing $5, $10, $20 million systems out on the ground and floating on the water and some other really creative, interesting things, because that's where the most complex part of solar has really gotten to. And we've become one of the leaders in that regard. We were one of the leaders when it was residential. Now we're one of the leaders as it's grown to be commercial scale.
On a national basis or on an international basis?
Both.
Okay.
We ship product all over the world, from Asia to the Americas, and and install now all over the United States.
And let's talk a little bit about for all our building owners and people out there that are interested. What has also happened? Has the price come down for solar, and is this becoming on a cost-benefit analysis from people who are just numbers-oriented and really aren't caring that much about the environment? Is this a good investment, Tom?
Yeah. In fact, the economics of solar has changed dramatically in the last 2 to 3 years. The coming of the Chinese manufacturing might has taken the most expensive component of solar, that is to say these panels, and cut their prices in half, really, in the last 18 months. And so the price of solar, the cost of solar installations, has come down about 40% in the last year and a half to 2 years.
Wow.
So much so that projects now pencil out and are economically viable with payback periods of 5 to 6 years. And actually, interestingly enough, the payback has become so economically sound that in many cases now, we actually don't even sell systems to people. We'll just sell the electricity at a rate that's much lower than they could buy it for, because it's Wall Street and other big economic funding sources have decided to jump in with both feet and pay for and buy these systems, such that oftentimes now we're able to simply sell the electricity. So I'll give you a classic example.
Sure.
The Irvine County School District down in Southern California wanted to look at doing solar systems, and so the initial look was relatively small, a $1 or $2 million system. And by actually completely turning it and saying, well, look, rather than us selling you a system, selling you equipment, why don't we build the systems on your roof, and we'll just sell you the electricity that comes from the solar, and we'll do so at a rate that is lower than you could buy from the utility. So the net effect is they're moving forward, or we're moving forward in doing that. And so we'll do about a 4 million watt system, a 4 megawatt system, $20-something million worth of solar, and end up actually selling the electricity to the school district. So the school district pays $0,
right?
And the moment we finish the project, their electricity bill will drop.
How much are they going to save over the life of those panels?
They will save $17 million over the next 20 years.
$17 million.
Right, and their investment up front is zero.
So wait a second, Tom. It almost sounds too good to be true. So you have across America, every school system is facing the same budget crisis the Irvine school system is facing. Why wouldn't everyone come to Tom Rooney and SPG Solar and want to do the same?
Well, there's a lot of misinformation and a lot. Well, I guess I should just say a lot of lack of information.
Okay, great.
A lot of people priced solar 4 or 5 years ago when it cost whatever it cost. And and so the two elements that exist today is one, that the cost of solar is dramatically lower than it was several years ago. And the second thing is, today Wall Street wants to participate. Big investment groups want to invest and own these systems and be able to sell electricity to people at lower rates. And so with the flood of cash that's come in to invest in these systems and the absolutely lower cost, it is a situation that appears to be good to be true. And by the way, that same situation is true from the small scale residential systems. Right now, residential homeowners can get systems installed on their roof for nothing and instantly start saving. We don't do that, by the way, so it's not a pitch of our company.
No. But we've had the great people from Solar City.
Exactly,
we've had them on, and was it again a trust? Their story was as great as yours, and we want our listeners to, like you said, Tom, avail themselves of the knowledge and the costs that are out there. Because 5 years ago, as you said, things were different, but now it's both an environmentally compelling, reasons to do this, but also economically compelling.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
I would tell you that very few clients decide to move $5 million or $10 million onto the table for environmental reasons today. Wish it was the case, but that's not the case.
Right.
They all do it for economic purposes, economic reasons. And once they've seen that the economics are phenomenal, then they are ecstatic about the fact that it's an environmental benefit. And that's a wonderful thing. If the day comes under Obama's administration or anybody else's that we have real cap and trade, you might see people doing it even more energetically. But the fact is, don't even need to be there, because right now the economics of solar are just so strong that people do it for economics reasons.
Hey, and Tom, you're such a world traveler and so amazingly well spoken. We have about 2.5 minutes left, but I want you to hit on two last topics.
Sure.
The worldview in terms of what Germany and the other countries around the world and how far ahead they are of us and here in America, and how much we have to catch up on, and the word on your website called photovoltaics, which I've never heard of before, and I want you to explain what it really means and things of that such.
Well, two big issues.
Yeah.
The first one being the global scene. The depressing fact is that the United States is woefully behind the world in terms of clean technology, and specifically photovoltaics. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we like to think that the United States is a technology leader. Right. But in the case of photovoltaics, we are a decade behind and falling behind by the day. Germany, Japan, Spain, France, and now even Canada are all way far ahead. The solar market in Germany, where the sun is the equivalent of Minnesota, the solar market there is per person 20 times the size of the United States. And so the technology leadership, based on being the end user, is right now in Germany. And frankly, the manufacturing leadership and all those great, exciting, high-tech jobs are now all in China. So if listeners hear nothing else, we've got to wake up and demand from our politicians that the United States not become a world follower in this area. There are clean, high-paying jobs that are going to every country but ours, because we haven't gotten the wake-up call that this is critically important. Well, I'll close with the photovoltaics piece, because everybody kind of gets a kick out of it. But we were the first company to invent a technology to take solar panels and actually install them floating on water, and they actually produce a ton of electricity and actually save water. So they cut all the water evaporation. But what everybody loves is the name, and instead of photovoltaics, it's photovoltaics. That's in floating. So.
It's truly amazing. So listen, Tom, we're going to have you back. You are, your DNA is green. Your vision is compelling, and you're truly a visionary. But more important, you're an inspirational leader, a wonderful speaker. We're honored to have you today. And Tom Rooney, you are living proof that green is good.
I love it. Thanks, guys.